Today, we're diving into the dark world of the internet with 7 terrifying stories involving Slender Man. Get ready for chilling tales of this tall, faceless figure dressed in a suit who stalks his victims in dark forests and abandoned places. So settle in, make sure there's no strange figure at the window, and let's begin this chilling journey. Oh, and before Slender Man shows up in your room, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave your like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss out on any terrifying content like this. Let's go. 1. The Forest of Lost Children. In the Green Mountains of Vermont, the small town of Bennington looked like a postcard from the American fall. Golden and red leaves covered the streets as the cold air heralded the arrival of November. For Emma Hayes, a teacher new to Glastonbury Elementary School, the town represented a fresh start after years of teaching in troubled Boston schools. Emma's adjustment went smoothly until the 3rd week of school, when she noticed something disturbing during art class. 3 of her students had drawn the same disturbing figure, an abnormally tall and thin silhouette dressed in black, with no defined face, partially hidden among trees. "What's that, Tyler?" asked Emma of the 8-year-old. "It's the tall man," he replied casually, without raising his eyes from the drawing. "He's in the forest near my house." Over the following weeks, more children began to include the figure in their drawings. Always the same pattern: extremely tall, disproportionately thin, dark suit, no facial features. Some drawings showed the figure with abnormally long arms, others with what looked like tentacles coming out of its back. Emma mentioned the drawings to Diane Miller, a veteran teacher who had been teaching at Bennington for 30 years. "Ah, the tall man," sighed Diane, her aged face wrinkling with concern. "That happens from time to time. Children have fertile imaginations, especially around Glastonbury Forest." Something in Diane's response seemed rehearsed, as if she were deliberately minimizing the situation. Emma decided to research the area further and discovered that the area around Bennington had a disturbing history. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people had mysteriously disappeared in the area, which became known as the Bennington Triangle. Extensive searches never found any trace of most of the victims. The most notorious case was that of Paula Weldon, a university student who disappeared while hiking on the Long Trail in December 1946. Her body was never found. Emma's search gained urgency when Tyler didn't show up for class on a Monday in October. His distraught parents reported that he had disappeared on Sunday afternoon after saying he was going to play in the yard. 3 days later, Lily Chen, another pupil who had drawn the tall man, also disappeared. The town panicked, community meetings were organized, searches were launched, and the state police were called in. Emma noticed that some of the older residents seemed more resigned than surprised, as if they were reliving a familiar nightmare. Determined to understand what was going on, Emma turned to local historian Dr. Samuel Harrison. The elderly man welcomed her into his house full of books and archives. "The disappearances follow a pattern," he explained, spreading yellowed newspaper clippings on the table. 1891, 1918, 1945, 1972, 1999, and now 2026. Every 27 years, children start drawing the same figure, and then they disappear. "But that's impossible," protested Emma. "It must be some kind of human predator copying old cases." Harrison shook his head. "I've considered all the rational explanations, but how do you explain that children who have never heard of the previous cases draw exactly the same picture. How do you explain that searchers never find anything, even with modern technology? He showed Emma an old book with accounts of the Abenaki natives who inhabited the region before the colonizers. They spoke of a forest entity that collected children and appeared in cycles determined by the stars. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Looking out of her apartment window, she saw something that chilled her blood. At the edge of the forest, partially illuminated by the moonlight, stood an impossibly tall and thin figure, motionless, watching. The next morning, Emma drove to the municipal library to do more research into the previous disappearances. In the archives, she found children's drawings from 1972 and 1999, identical to the ones her students were drawing now. One detail caught her eye. In 1999, the disappearances came to an abrupt halt when a mysterious fire destroyed part of Glastonbury Forest. The fire started exactly where the ruins of an old settlement abandoned in the 19th century stood. When Emma left the library, she noticed a strange symbol drawn in chalk on the floor, a circle with an X through it. The same symbol appeared on some of the children's drawings. That afternoon, during a school meeting about the disappearances, Emma noticed that Diane was avoiding her gaze. After the meeting, she confronted the older teacher. "You know more than you're letting on," Emma accused. "You were here in 1999, and probably in 1972 too." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "We can't talk about it. Talking attracts your attention." "Whose attention?" "The tall man. He's already taken 2 children, Diane." The older teacher finally gave in. "My sister disappeared in 1972. I was 10 years old. I saw that thing take her into the forest. Nobody believed me." Diane explained that in 1999, when the disappearances began again, a group of locals who knew the story took desperate measures. They set fire to the ruins in the forest, a place they believed to be the portal used by the entity. "It worked, but not permanently," whispered Diane. "It always comes back. It always finds another way." As night fell over Bennington, Emma knew she had to act. More children would disappear if nothing was done. With the symbols from the drawings and the information from Diane and Harrison, she had a chance of breaking the cycle again. The forest of lost children waited, and somewhere among the ancient trees, an impossible figure watched patiently, as it had done for generations. Second distortion. In the grey streets of Edinburgh, where the morning mist embraced the old stone buildings, Daniel McAllister had built a reputation as a photographer of urban landscapes. At the age of 34, his exhibitions in small local galleries were beginning to attract attention, his dark aesthetic capturing the Gothic essence of the Scottish capital. It was after his last exhibition, Shadows of Edinburgh, that Daniel noticed something strange about his photographs. Reviewing the images on his computer, he noticed a subtle distortion in the corner of a photo of Calton Hill, a vertical blur that didn't look like a common camera defect. "Probably condensation on the lens," he muttered to himself, filing the observation away as a technical curiosity. The following week, during a photo shoot in the ruins of Holyrood Abbey, Daniel captured dozens of images in the twilight. As he reviewed them in his apartment in the Leith district, his blood ran cold. In 3 consecutive photographs, the same vertical distortion appeared, more defined now, vaguely resembling an extremely tall and thin human figure, partially obscured by the mist. Even more disturbing, the figure seemed to be in slightly different positions in each photo, as if it were gradually moving closer. Daniel examined his camera meticulously, cleaned the lens and checked the sensor, but found nothing to explain the anomalies. As a professional, he was familiar with all kinds of technical faults, and this didn't fit into any familiar category. Determined to solve the mystery, he returned to the Abbey the following evening, equipped with his best camera. The place was deserted, tourists driven away by the cold and rainy weather. For almost 2 hours, Daniel methodically photographed the site, paying particular attention to the areas where the distortion had appeared. That evening, while transferring the new images to his computer, the discovery left him paralyzed. The figure was present in almost all the photos now, more defined and undoubtedly closer. In one particularly clear image, Daniel could make out what appeared to be a black suit covering an impossibly thin and elongated body. Where the face should have been, there was only a pale, empty surface. "This can't be real," he whispered, rubbing his tired eyes. Over the next few days, Daniel became obsessed. He compulsively photographed different locations around the city, only to discover that the figure appeared in each new set of images, always closer, more defined. In some recent photos, he could see what appeared to be abnormally long and thin arms hanging at the side of the entity's body. Friends began to notice changes in his behavior. Daniel cancelled appointments, seemed constantly exhausted, and spoke in a disconnected way about something watching him through his photographs. His ex-girlfriend, Fiona, a clinical psychologist, visited him after receiving worrying messages. She found the apartment in a state of chaos, with photographs covering every available surface. On the walls, Daniel had drawn strange symbols, circles with X's through them, and stylized figures of trees. "I don't remember drawing that," he confessed, looking at the walls as if seeing them for the first time. "It happens often now. I lose hours, sometimes whole days." Fiona convinced Daniel to see a doctor who diagnosed extreme stress and the possible onset of schizophrenia. Medicines were prescribed, but Daniel rarely took them, convinced that his condition was not psychological, but something to do with the entity in his photographs. One morning, Daniel woke up with a sense of clarity that he hadn't felt for weeks. He decided to confront his torment directly. Equipped with his camera, he headed to Greyfriars Cemetery, an ancient site steeped in history, where he planned a final confrontation through his lens. The cemetery was shrouded in dense fog that morning, the old gravestones emerging like islands in a sea of white. Daniel photographed methodically, moving between the centuries-old tombs. As he reviewed the images on the camera screen, his heart raced. The figure was there, closer than ever, just a few meters behind him, in each photo. Turning quickly, Daniel saw nothing but the mist and the silhouettes of the tombstones. He continued photographing frantically, each new image showing the entity even closer, although it remained invisible to the naked eye. In the last photograph he took, the figure stood directly behind him, impossibly long arms outstretched, as if they were about to envelop him. Daniel dropped the camera, a scream catching in his throat as he felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. 3 days later, Fiona received a package in the mail containing a memory card and a brief note. "You were right. It was all in my head. I'm better now. I'm going to take some time away from Edinburgh. Don't try to contact me." Worried but relieved, Fiona inserted the card into her computer to view Daniel's latest photographs. The sequence showed images of Greyfriars Cemetery, increasingly blurred and frantic. The last photo, however, was perfectly clear, a selfie of Daniel smiling, looking healthy and relaxed. Fiona smiled, until she noticed something strange about the image. Daniel's eyes looked empty, his smile too stiff, and reflected in the dilated pupil, almost imperceptible unless you looked very closely, was the silhouette of an impossibly tall and thin figure. 2 weeks later, Edinburgh police filed Daniel McAllister's disappearance as an unsolved case. His apartment was found empty, except for a broken camera on the floor and walls covered in strange symbols. The only clue to his whereabouts was a series of photographs on his computer, each showing progressively more distant locations in the city, all containing the same vertical distortion in the background, now familiar to anyone who knew of his case. 3. The Operator. In the isolated hills of Piha Beach, a small coastal town on New Zealand's North Island, the Horizon Films documentary team arrived in March 2025 to investigate a series of mysterious disappearances. 6 residents had disappeared without a trace in the last 8 months, dividing the community between conspiracy theories and veiled accusations. The team was led by Marcus Chen, an award-winning director of investigative documentaries, accompanied by producer Eliza Tanner, cameraman James Wilson, sound technician May Lin, and local researcher Thomas Blackwood. Staying in an old Victorian house overlooking the black choppy sea, they planned to spend 3 weeks documenting the case that the local media was calling the Black Coast Disappearances. "This place has a strange energy," commented May while setting up audio equipment on the first day. "Don't you feel it? Like something is watching?" The others laughed at the comment, attributing it to the city's naturally gloomy atmosphere, where dense fog often covered the volcanic sand beaches. The first interviews with residents revealed a divided community. Some believed that the disappearances were related to drug trafficking. Others suggested that the victims had simply left town without warning. A smaller group, mainly elderly Maori, spoke in whispers about Te Kaiwakatiki, the Operator, an ancient entity that occasionally collected people. On the 3rd day of filming, technical problems began to emerge. The recordings showed unexplained static interference, particularly during interviews that mentioned supernatural theories. May checked the equipment repeatedly, but found no faults. "It must be local electromagnetic interference," she concluded, although her expression betrayed doubt. That same night, Marcus woke up with a dry cough that he couldn't control. Over the next few days, James and Eliza developed the same symptom. Only Thomas and May remained without the persistent cough that seemed to worsen during filming. "It's just the sea air and the humidity," insisted Marcus, refusing to interrupt the schedule. On the 7th day, while reviewing the footage, Eliza noticed something disturbing in an interview recorded on the beach. In the background, partially obscured by mist, a tall, abnormally thin figure seemed to be watching the crew from afar. "Did anyone see this person during the shoot?" she asked, zooming in on the image on the screen. No one had noticed. More disturbing, when reviewing other footage, the same figure appeared in several different scenes, always distant, always watching, always unnoticed during the recordings. The audio distortions also followed a pattern. Analyzing carefully, May discovered that underneath the static there were almost imperceptible sounds, something akin to breathing, but rhythmic in a non-human way. The team's behavior began to change subtly. Marcus became obsessively focused on filming specific locations mentioned in local legends. James spent hours reviewing footage, looking for the mysterious figure in each frame. Eliza repeatedly drew the same symbol in her notebook, a circle with vertical lines that resembled an extremely tall, stylized figure. Only Thomas seemed to notice the changes in the others. "You guys need to stop," he warned after finding Marcus filming alone at midnight. This has happened before. In 1998, another documentary filmmaker came to investigate disappearances. He became the seventh missing person. The team ignored the warnings. On the 10th night, during a particularly intense session of reviewing material, they discovered something that chilled their blood. In one of the first shots, taken when they arrived in town, the figure was clearly visible next to the team's van. It was no longer just a distant silhouette. You could see that it was impossibly tall and thin, wearing something dark, with arms that were too long and a face that was featureless. "He's been watching us from the beginning," whispered James, his voice hoarse from constant coughing. That night, Marcus's cough worsened dramatically. Between spasms, he muttered about the operator and how he chooses those who see him. In the morning, his room was empty, the bed untouched. Marcus's disappearance accelerated the disintegration of the team. The authorities were called in, but the search turned up no clues. The recordings from that night only showed Marcus leaving alone with his camera, walking towards the beach, as if answering a call. 2 days later, James disappeared in the same way. The remaining footage became almost incomprehensible, dominated by static, visual distortions, and that sound of non-human breathing getting louder and louder. Eliza, May, and Thomas decided to abandon the project and leave Piha immediately. While packing up the equipment, Thomas found the memory card from Marcus's personal camera. The last images showed only mist and darkness, but the audio captured his last words. "He's not a myth. He is the operator. He collects those who perceive him, who capture his image. And now, he is coming for all of us." The Horizon Films van was found abandoned on the road to Auckland. Of the 5 people who arrived at Piha Beach, only Thomas Blackwood returned, refusing to talk about what had happened or the whereabouts of the others. The equipment recovered contained hours of footage, corrupted by interference. In a single clear image, 5 tall, inhumanly thin silhouettes watched the Victorian house from afar, one for each member of the team who dared to capture the operator in their lens. What's up, guys? The Slender Man stories are chilling so far, aren't they? If you're enjoying these spooky tales, how about taking a quick break and subscribing to the channel? Just click on the subscribe button below and leave a like too. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more terrifying content like this. It's quick and makes all the difference. Now let's get back to our Slender Man stories, shall we? There's still a lot of terror ahead. 4. The Babysitter. In the isolated hills of Yorkshire, England, where the autumn mist enveloped the old estates like a ghostly cloak, stood Thornfield Manor. The imposing Victorian building, with its Gothic towers and tall windows, was partially hidden by a long-neglected garden, where moss-covered statues silently watched over rare visitors. It was to this setting that Emma Collins, a 17-year-old student in need of money for university, headed one grey October afternoon. The ad in the local paper promised generous pay for looking after an only child during the weekends, while her parents were away on business. "Welcome to Thornfield," said Mrs. Lancaster, an elegant woman with a tense expression, as she led Emma through the entrance hall decorated with antique portraits and ornate mirrors. "Oliver is 6 years old. He's a lovely boy, but a bit imaginative." Mr. Lancaster, a tall, reserved man, only nodded formally before handing Emma a list of instructions and emergency numbers. "We'll be in London until Sunday evening. The house is old, it creaks a bit, but don't worry about it." After the Lancasters left, Emma found Oliver in the library, a pale boy with big, serious eyes who was watching her with disconcerting intensity. "You're staying in the pink room," he said, his voice surprisingly mature for his age. "It's the only one he can't get into." "Him who?" asked Emma, smiling. "The tall man in the garden," replied Oliver good-naturedly. "He stands outside, looking in through the windows, but sometimes he manages to get in." Emma nodded understandingly, attributing the story to typical childish imagination. During dinner, she tried to distract Oliver with cheerful stories, but the boy remained vigilant, his eyes constantly straying to the kitchen windows that overlooked the dark garden. "He's there now," whispered Oliver suddenly, pointing to the window, "looking at us." Emma turned around, seeing only her own reflection and Oliver's in the dark glass. "There's no one there, darling. It's just our imagination." "You can't see it yet," Oliver explained patiently, "but you will. Everyone does eventually." That night, after putting Oliver to bed, Emma explored the silent mansion. The house was a maze of corridors, closed rooms and stairs that seemed to lead nowhere. In the library, she found old photographs of the property and its previous residents. Curiously, many showed strange distortions, vertical blotches, or blurred figures in the background that could be explained as development flaws. As she went up to her room, Emma stopped in front of a large mirror in the hallway. For an instant, she thought she saw something move behind her reflection, a tall, impossibly thin figure. When she turned around, the corridor was empty. "Just shadows," she muttered to herself, blaming the poor lighting and Oliver's stories. The next morning, Oliver seemed more relaxed, explaining that the tall man rarely appeared during the day. Emma took the opportunity to ask him more about his imaginary friend. "He's not my friend," Oliver corrected seriously. "He was here before us. Mum says it's just my imagination, but the previous nanny saw him too. That's why she left." "And what does he look like?" asked Emma, feigning interest. "Very tall, taller than the doors, thin as a toothpick. He has no face, just a white spot, and his arms are too long." Oliver demonstrated, stretching out his own arms. "Sometimes it has more arms, like tentacles." Emma felt an involuntary shiver, but kept her smile. "Well, if he shows up, let me know, okay?" In the afternoon, while Oliver was drawing in the living room, Emma noticed that all his drawings showed the same figure, a black silhouette, impossibly tall and thin, always watching from afar, a small house that clearly represented Thornfield. The night brought a storm, with wind howling around the mansion and branches scratching the windows. Emma checked on Oliver several times, always finding him sleeping peacefully. It was during one of these checks that, as she closed the door to the boy's room, she saw something reflected in the hall mirror that made her heart stop. A figure was standing at the end of the corridor, exactly as Oliver had described, impossibly tall, almost touching the ceiling, thin as a skeleton, wearing something dark. Where there should have been a face, there was only a pale, empty surface. Emma turned quickly, but the corridor was empty. When she looked in the mirror again, she saw only her own terrified reflection. Over the next few days, the sightings increased. A reflection in the kitchen window, a silhouette in the bathroom mirror, always for just a second, always disappearing when Emma tried to look directly. Even more disturbing, she began to find drawings of circles with an X in the center scattered around the house, on the walls, on the fogged mirrors after the shower, in the condensation on the windows, which neither she nor Oliver would admit to having made. On the last night before the Lancasters' return, Emma woke up to the sound of Oliver talking in her bedroom. When she opened the door, she found the boy sitting on the bed, staring at the window. "He wants to come in," said Oliver calmly. "He's closer now. See?" Emma followed his gaze and for the first time saw clearly not a reflection or a fleeting impression, but the real figure outside the window, impossibly tall, watching them with his featureless face, his two long arms touching the glass as if testing its resistance. When the Lancasters returned the following evening, they found the house empty. Emma and Oliver had disappeared, leaving behind only a series of photographs taken with Emma's cell phone, each showing the tall, thin figure gradually getting closer, the last capturing her inside the house, in the upstairs hallway. 2 weeks later, the local newspaper ran another ad. Babysitter required for 6-year-old. No previous experience necessary. Generous pay. 5 scattered pages. In the shadows of Princeton University, where academic tradition blends with Gothic architecture, comparative literature student Michael Chen found something disturbing in the Hamilton Library. A black notebook, abandoned among piles of psychology books, caught his attention, not because of its appearance, but because of the contents it revealed when opened. The pages were filled with obsessive drawings of a tall, thin figure wearing a dark suit with no defined face. In some illustrations, the creature had abnormally long arms. In others, something resembling tentacles coming out of its back. Frantic annotations filled the margins, phrases like, "He's watching me," "I can't sleep," and "He approaches when no one is looking." Michael immediately recognized the figure as Slender Man, the fictional character born on internet forums. As a student of contemporary narratives, he knew the origin of the myth, but something about the drawings conveyed a disturbing obsession that went beyond casual interest. On the back cover, he found a name: Thomas Blackwood, Department of Anthropology. Determined to return the notebook, Michael went to the anthropology building the next day. "Thomas Blackwood, he hasn't shown up for class for almost 3 weeks," informed the department secretary, frowning. "We're trying to contact him. He was conducting research into contemporary urban legends, but he just disappeared." Intrigued and slightly disturbed, Michael left his contact details in case Thomas reappeared. As he left the building, he noticed something strange pinned to a notice board, a sheet of paper with the same drawing style as the notebook, showing the elongated figure among trees. Underneath it was written in flickering letters, "He follows those who seek him." Over the next few days, Michael found more similar pages scattered around campus, stuck to poles, inside books in the library, even on the windshield of his car. Each drawing seemed more frantic than the last, and the figure of Slender Man appeared progressively closer in each illustration. His academic curiosity turned into an obsession. Michael started researching Thomas Blackwood, discovering that the student had started a controversial thesis on the collective manifestation of supernatural entities through shared belief. His teachers mentioned that Thomas had become increasingly reclusive and paranoid in the weeks before his disappearance. One night, while going through his notebook in his dorm room, Michael noticed something he had missed before: geographical coordinates written in almost invisible ink in the margins of several pages. As he mapped the coordinates, he realized that they formed a pattern around the ancient woodland that surrounded the campus. It was then that he began to feel that he was being watched. Walking around the campus, he often spotted at the edge of his peripheral vision a tall figure standing between distant trees. When he turned to look directly, there was nothing there. His computer began to glitch inexplicably. Audio recordings for his classes contained static and strange sound distortions. In some of his photos of the campus, unexplained vertical distortions appeared in the background. Michael developed a persistent cough and began to suffer from insomnia. When he could sleep, he had nightmares about endless corridors and a tall figure watching him from afar, always getting closer, but never quite reaching him. One morning, he found a symbol drawn on his bathroom mirror, a circle with an X through it. The same symbol that appeared repeatedly in Thomas's notebook. Michael didn't remember drawing it. Desperate for answers, he decided to follow the coordinates to the woods. In the center of the pattern, formed by the mapped points, he found a clearing where trees had been marked with the same symbol. In the center was a pile of pages scattered to the wind. More drawings, more paranoid notes, not just from Thomas, but apparently from other people over the years. As he picked up the pages, Michael felt a sudden chill and realized that the forest had gone completely silent. Looking up, he saw an impossible figure in the distance between the trees, just like in the drawings. That night, Michael's notebook was found abandoned in the Hamilton Library, along with his camera and phone. Of Michael Chen, no sign remained other than pages scattered around campus, obsessive drawings of a tall, faceless figure, with paranoid notes in the margins. And so, the cycle continued. 6. Transmission interrupted. In the bluish lights of his apartment in Seoul, South Korea, Park Jin-ho, known online as Ghost Hunter, was adjusting his webcam for yet another live broadcast. At the age of 24, Jin-ho had built up a streaming channel with over 500,000 followers, specializing in horror games and over-the-top reactions that delighted his audience. "What's up, ghosts? Ready for another digital nightmare?" he greeted in Korean, checking the chat that was already buzzing with messages from fans. Today, we're going to explore something different, an indie game that many of you have asked for. Jin-ho opened the anonymous email he had received 3 days earlier, containing a download link for a game called The Operator Proxies. With no identified developer, the game looked like a variation on the popular Slender Man titles, but with a more raw and disturbing aesthetic. Apparently, this game was created by a developer who disappeared shortly after launching it, explained Jin-ho, feeding into the atmosphere of mystery that his followers loved. Classic marketing strategy, isn't it? The broadcast began as normal. The game featured a protagonist exploring a dark forest, collecting pages while being chased by a tall, thin figure in a suit. The mechanics were familiar, but something about the atmosphere seemed more oppressive than usual. The audio contained barely audible whispers, and the digital fog seemed to move too organically. 20 minutes after the start, the chat began to display strange messages. "Is there someone behind you? Who's that in the corner of your room? Jin-ho, look behind you." The streamer laughed, used to the viewer's attempts to scare him. "Very funny, guys. I'm alone, as usual." But the messages persisted, becoming more specific and alarmed. Several viewers described the same thing. A tall figure, partially visible in the dark corner of the room, behind Jin-ho. Some even shared screenshots showing a dark silhouette that the streamer insisted was not present. "You're all set to scare me, right? Good job editing the images," he joked, although his voice betrayed a note of uncertainty. Over the next hour, technical problems began to affect the broadcast. The image occasionally distorted into horizontal lines. The audio suffered from static interference at specific moments. Curiously, always when Jin-ho mentioned the name Slender Man or when he approached a new page in the game. Viewers noticed that the figure in the background seemed to move slightly with each interference, gradually approaching the streamer unaware of its presence. The chat turned into a chorus of warnings that Jin-ho continued to ignore, attributing everything to an elaborate prank by his fans. "The internet must be unstable today," he commented, adjusting his streaming settings. "And you guys are really committed to this figure in the background thing. I admire the dedication." In the third hour of streaming, Jin-ho reached what seemed to be the climax of the game, an abandoned building where the last page would be hidden. The digital protagonist entered a room with a single chair in the center, eerily similar to Jin-ho's streaming setup. It was at this point that the transmission suffered its worst interference. The screen went completely black, with only the audio working, heavy breathing, and the sound of something being dragged. The viewers, now genuinely alarmed, heard Jin-ho mutter in confusion, "How strange. All the lights in my apartment have just... Wait, there's someone..." His voice was cut off by a high-pitched interference sound that caused many viewers to remove their headphones. When the image returned 108 seconds later, it showed only Jin-ho's empty chair, his headset lying on the floor. For almost 5 minutes, the broadcast continued like this. The empty chair, the game still running on the computer screen, showing the digital protagonist standing in front of the virtual chair. In the chat, panic and confusion. Some believed it was an elaborate performance. Others demanded that someone call the police. The broadcast finally ended when someone, or something, turned off Jin-ho's computer, leaving his 30,000 simultaneous viewers in shock. Over the next 48 hours, worried fans contacted the authorities in Seoul. Police found Jin-ho's apartment locked from the inside, with no signs of forced entry. Inside, everything was perfectly organized, except for his streaming setup, where the chair was overturned and the computer still warm. No trace of Park Jin-ho. A week after his disappearance, followers received notifications that Ghost Hunter is broadcasting live. Thousands connected immediately, finding only a black screen with static audio. Occasionally, the static subsided enough to reveal what sounded like breathing and whispers in Korean, words that the most dedicated viewers transcribed as, "He follows those who see him. Don't look for me." The account was suspended by the platform hours later, but not before hundreds of viewers reported technical problems on their own computers after watching the mysterious final broadcast of Ghost Hunter. And some swore they saw, at the edge of their peripheral vision, a tall, thin figure, watching them silently. 7. The empty suit. In the narrow streets of Los Angeles, where Hollywood glamour mixes with the mystery of old tailoring traditions, Mario Fabrocchino kept his discreet workshop in a converted shed at the back of his house. At 68, Mario had built up an impeccable reputation among a select clientele, concert pianists, actors, and executives who valued his exceptional skill with needle and thread. One foggy March morning, Mario found a brown envelope slid under the door of his workshop. Inside was an anonymous request, written in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. A black suit with specifications that made him frown. The measurements were impossible. Excessively long sleeves, shoulders that were too narrow, and a height that suggested a client of more than 2.5 meters. "Some kind of joke," muttered Mario, but when he turned the paper over, he found a substantial check and a note. "I know that only you can create this piece. Urgent. Finish by the end of the week." Intrigued and slightly disturbed, Mario hesitated. In his 50-year career, he had never seen such disproportionate measurements. No human being could have such dimensions. But the check was tempting, and his professional pride prevented him from turning down a challenge. For 3 days, Mario worked obsessively on the impossible suit. The black fabric seemed to absorb more light than it should, creating an almost tangible darkness when folded. The measurements were so strange that Mario had to adapt his mannequins, extending them in improvised ways to accommodate the bizarre proportions. "It looks like I'm sewing for a shadow," he commented to his only assistant, who had left earlier that day, uncomfortable with the strange project. On the evening of the 3rd day, Mario finished the suit. Hanging on the modified mannequin, the garment had a disturbing quality. It looked more like an absence of light than a physical object. The sleeves hung like disjointed limbs, too long for any human arm. Exhausted, Mario left the suit hanging and went home. That night, he dreamt of dark corridors and a tall figure watching him from afar. The next morning, no customers showed up to collect the suit. Mario called the number left on the envelope, but the line was disconnected. The check, he discovered when he tried to deposit it, was from an account that had been closed for decades. It was on returning to the shop after the bank that Mario noticed something for the first time: a tall, impossibly thin figure standing on the opposite corner, wearing what looked like the suit he had created. But that was impossible. The suit was still hanging in his workshop, untouched. Over the next few days, the figure reappeared in different places, always watching Mario's workshop from afar. Each day, it seemed to be a few meters closer. The most disturbing thing, even when the suit remained visibly hanging in the workshop, the figure kept appearing, as if there were 2 identical suits. On the 5th day, Mario called the police, reporting a possible stalker. The officers found no one, and gently suggested that the elderly tailor perhaps needed more rest. "I'm seeing things," Mario muttered to himself, staring at his hanging suit. In the dim light of the late afternoon, the suit seemed to move slightly, as if it were breathing. That evening, Mario decided to destroy the suit. When he tried to cut it, however, he found that the scissors couldn't penetrate the fabric. He tried to burn it, but the flames seemed to go around the material without affecting it. On the morning of the 7th day, the figure was standing directly across the street. Now, Mario could clearly see that there was no face visible inside the suit's hood, just an empty darkness where there should have been human features. When he closed the shop that night, Mario saw the figure in the reflection of the shop window, now on the sidewalk in front of his door. He ran home and locked all the doors. In his bedroom, Mario was woken at midnight by a familiar sound, the soft clink of needles from his workshop. Someone or something was there. Through the window, he saw that the workshop light was on. The next morning, worried customers found Mario's workshop open but empty. The impossible suit had disappeared from the mannequin. There was no sign of the renowned tailor, just a pair of scissors lying on the floor and a book of measurements open on a blank page, as if waiting for a new customer. In the following weeks, local residents reported seeing a strangely tall and thin figure walking through the streets of Hollywood after dark, wearing a suit perfectly tailored to his impossible proportions. And next to him, a smaller silhouette, like a shadow, carrying what looked like a tape measure. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving Slender Man. So, what did you think? Which story gave you the most goosebumps? Will any of them make you look twice at the shadows in the corners of your room? Let me know in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the terrifying world of Slender Man, don't forget to leave your like. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more scary content like this. And if you're not subscribed yet, take the opportunity to subscribe now and activate the little bell.